Hello, and welcome to the weekly voice chat of the Men Are Human Discord server. We are the semi official server of the men's rights subreddit. And this is our weekly chat. It used to be on Fridays, now is on Saturdays. And today's topic is rape culture, or rather, the reality of rape culture. And how does the feminist theory of rape culture match the reality of how society views rape? My take is this. I think the idea that we live in a rape culture in the West where rape is somehow trivialized is absolute nonsense because sexual assault is one of the most serious crimes a person can commit and is seen as a heinous crime by virtually anybody, including other inmates. In prison, people there for sex crimes are treated worse than virtually anybody else, worse than murderers, worse than drug smugglers. So even among the prison population, sex offenders are seen as the lowest of the low. And rape is illegal virtually everywhere and carries a very harsh sentence virtually everywhere, including countries like Saudi Arabia. Now, are there cases of corruption, especially amongst the elites, where you hear about sex slaves and where you hear cover ups? Absolutely, 100%. But the idea that society somehow supports that or somehow okay with that is, in my opinion, absolute nonsense. Another fact that feminists point to defend the idea of there being a rape culture is the low conviction rate. The idea that society doesn't really take rape very seriously, and thus rapists are let off scot free. I think it's really more a mixture of A, rape is a difficult crime to prove in court because even with physical evidence, there still has to be proof of intent. And the way our court system works in the US is you have to prove guilt beyond reasonable doubts. And another UK system is similar because the US system was more or less modeled on the UK system. Secondly, you have to look at the existence of false accusations. And we're not saying that the majority of cases are false accusations, but we're saying the number is probably somewhat significant. Some studies will show you 2%, some will show you 40%. I think the truth is probably somewhere in between. Let's say 10, 15, or 20%. But all in all, what this adds up to is a very distorted picture of low conviction rather than saying, oh, well, the reason why conviction rates are so low is because people just don't care. The reality is it's a difficult crime to prove and it's a difficult crime to prosecute because it's very difficult to prove intent when the physical evidence itself doesn't prove a crime. If someone breaks into someone's home and steals something and leaves fingerprints or DNA, you have proof of a crime because there's a broken window or even just their fingerprint on a doorknob and a TV is missing. You know theft has occurred. But after the fact, just because there's DNA or fingerprint evidence, it's still a he said versus she said, or could be he or she said kind of case where it doesn't necessarily prove intent. And we're not trying to downplay at all the seriousness of sexual assault, but we are trying to criticize the way that feminists would present sexual assault as something that society doesn't take seriously, because it's just, in my opinion, not even close to the truth. Now, I'm currently in the UK, and I'm going to post what happens when you Google rape prosecution UK. You get these results here, and you'll see recently they're all from 2022 or last year 2021. There's currently a effort right now in the UK. There's talks about a quota for rape prosecutions to try and increase the rape conviction rate, which is very low, according to these articles. And the idea is to have a quota to increase the number of prosecutions. This is a very flawed idea because, in my opinion, this is going to result in cases being pressed forward even if they have very flimsy evidence. And so you will end up inevitably with innocent people going to jail. The solution to low conviction rate isn't to push for a mandatory quota of convictions, but rather it's to research the problem and use the data to improve your method of policing, improve your method of investigating sex crimes, and improve your method of convicting sex crimes. So that is the topic. I know Ma has some links prepared. We do this every week. and the floor is now open.
Thank you, Blue. And I think that one of the best things we can do to illustrate this is this article from BuzzFeed, which goes through the whole of the idea. And it's probably best if I give this to you in their own words. So let me just post a screenshot here. Please keep talking while I'm trying to get this.
Well, I can see what you posted now, BuzzFeed. BuzzFeed. What is rape culture? Every 2 minutes, someone in the U.S. is sexually assaulted. A look at the cultural factors behind the statistic. Knowing BuzzFeed, I can kind of imagine what it's going to say. I imagine they blame patriarchy, and I imagine that they're saying that women are seen as disposable, and thus violence against women is taken less seriously. This is my guess as to what that article is going to say.
Well, it's more complicated than that, but they do actually mention male rape victims, which I was very surprised about, because mostly they don't mention them. But what they actually say is rape culture is a culture in which sexual violence is considered the norm, in which people aren't taught not to rape, but are taught not to be raped. Now, this is kind of twisted thinking, because you need to do both. You need to teach children a good moral foundation so they won't do that sort of thing. And you also need to teach children that not everyone has been taught a solid moral foundation, and that there is no possible way to teach everyone a solid moral foundation without, even if you mandate it by law that they have to go through this particular kind of upbringing. It's just not going to happen. So they have a very warped way of thinking about this. And of course, the power plus privilege sort of thing comes into play as well. And what they will do is they will say that, well, men have power over women, so women can't rape men, which is a form of rape culture. In fact, this article, if we take that rape culture as a real thing, I don't think there are any studies on it.
Well, hang on, and not on that. Let me just really fast. Not only with. If I can say really fast, not only if they say that women can't rape men because of power plus prejudice, not only is that in and of itself a rape culture, but that completely flies in the face of when feminists say they want to oppose harmful gender roles and gender stereotypes. By saying that women can't rape men because they don't have the institutional power, they are perpetuating harmful gender stereotypes. They do the same thing for domestic violence. And in fact, when it comes to rape in India, feminists actually fought and succeeded to keep this under law. Men are not protected from rape under law in India, which I'm sure we'll get to in a little bit. Sorry, I just wanted to throw that in there.
No, that's perfectly fine. Essentially, rape culture is another one of those buzzwords that they use kind of like a hammer to beat people over the head with. And, it's sort of this self-confirming ideology where every time there's a rape, it confirms that rape culture is real. And it doesn't matter that rape is actually fairly rare. According to UK stats, only like 1 in 1,000 people are raped. But it's a complicated issue, and we do need to be careful about it. Because one of the things that we see a lot, and I've seen a few of these around my way, is these Take Back the Night protests, and I don't know who these are aimed at. So you get these women, they'll go out with their placards, dressed up like they're going to a nightclub in the middle of the night, and they'll be walking around like waving their placards and stuff. And like, are they protesting rapists? Are they protesting against muggers? Are rapists and muggers going to go, oh, these women don't want us doing that? That's why? Yeah, we shouldn't actually like go out and do this. Wow, I've changed my mind totally. But this isn't like rapists generally know that rape is wrong. That's why they're secretive about it. Like they don't want to be caught,
And that's
so
it.
they
That's
take.
my argument. That's my argument against these so-called consent classes, because I think a consent class is nothing more than a handbook of excuses for a rapist to give. You're now basically teaching a rapist the things to say if they get caught to try and make themselves look innocent. So they now know all the steps that you're supposed to follow to get consent. You're now telling a would-be rapist all the things to pretend to do or pretend to say or know how to say to try and get off the hook. Because I think you're exactly right, what you just said. Almost any normal person innately knows that assaulting someone is wrong. It's not something that you have to be taught.
Well, I think it is something you have to be taught, but it isn't taught in the sense that they want it taught, which is pretty much the South Park drugs are bad, okay? It's kind of more in the sense that you have to teach them that just teach them generally right from wrong. And if you generally teach them right from wrong and you teach them that other human beings have intrinsic moral value, then they won't go and do these sorts of things because it won't be in their nature because you've already headed that off. You don't actually have to tell kids not to rape. All you have to do is teach them how to be good people and they will just not do it. I mean, you do need like some consent classes are probably justified. Like you should probably teach like teenagers that other people should respect their consent, and you should probably teach them to be like, just ask before doing something, and like, just like if you're not sure if this is going to go over well, but and all that sort of thing. But typically speaking, that like people know they're doing wrong when they're doing wrong. Like if they have a solid moral foundation. If they already have that solid moral foundation, they're not going to stealth their partner. They're not going to drug somebody at a bar. I mean, the person who drugs somebody at a bar knows that they're not allowed to drug people at bars. It's like that's a fairly well known thing. I'm pretty sure that everyone can pick up on that. But what they mean by teaching children consent is they want a license to go into schools and take them over and teach them feminism. That's what they really mean.
I think
I
the
mean,
issue when it comes to consent classes is, as you said, most people know what consent is. I think the other issues, there's so many issues when it comes to what they're calling rape culture and definition of consent, because the general definition is just permission from the other party to engage in sexual actions. But then things sometimes get complicated because most people know that, but then people start bringing up different situations and it gets all muddled in there. Like a situation where you're both adults and you're coming back from a bar drunk. Well, who's responsible? Is the guy the rapist? Is the girl the rapist? Are they both rapists in that situation? We brought up India for a short while. One of the biggest controversies in India is them trying to pass a law that makes marital rape illegal, and yet the definition of marital rape no matter how clear it may seem to feminist groups that are pushing for this, it really isn't clear. I mean, the worry there is, well, at that point, you could be married, have sex with your wife with consent, and then she can go to the police the next day and say she was raped. So it's a situation where people do need to learn what consent is, but there needs to be distinctions made, because right now things are very muddled and people think, oh, consent is so clear, and it's really not, because there are so many scenarios. The idea of it itself may seem clear, but if you start going into scenarios and situations that people end up in a lot of the time, it sort of gets muddled. You know? Because the other thing, too, is the issue of, well, verbal consent. And the reality of sex is most people don't just verbally go and ask, hey, you know, I don't know how to put it. They don't like stop for 5 seconds usually and just ask, you know, do I have your consent? Yes. Do I have your consent? Yes. They do ask usually though, you know, do you want to have sex? And they say yes and they do it, but even then there are moments where they both just start doing it. And it's like, well, then neither of them consented in that situation. So things when it comes to consent and rape culture have never been clear. But they're trying to teach it as it is clear, and it's really not. There's still so much that needs to be figured out.
By the way, I just linked the article from India. Essentially, the government was going to include men under the definition of rape, and feminist groups protested. So, as of today, it is not illegal to sexually assault 10% of the world's population.
I mean, the thing that really bothers me about this is that when you talk about rape culture, the people who the whole rape culture idea mostly seems to apply to is men. So if you think about it, the only people who are actually making apologies for rape are people who are talking about male bodily autonomy, because male bodily autonomy is something that people have a really hard time wrapping their heads around, apparently. It's just like every subject that comes up, it's like male bodily autonomy doesn't seem to really matter to people. It's you know, I mean, obviously it plays into like male disposability and things like that. So I don't think that you know, I think it's pretty clear that male disposability is the key issue here. It's a case of people don't really care about men's bodily autonomy, so they just
Yeah, I think the male disposability and the male empathy gap is at the core of the vast majority of men's issues. If not for the male empathy gap, and if not for male disposability, the men's rights movement probably wouldn't have to exist.
I do see male disposability and the empathy gap as our key issue. Like it's the font from which all our other issues flow. It's like we've done whole episodes on it, but I mean the basic principle is what we've already discussed. It's that people just don't care about men as much as they care about women. Like a lot of the empathy that men should have has just been like given to women instead, and so people just don't care about men all that much. And historically, that played a lot of that played a lot into it was like a major thing in wars and things like that, and to an extent it was necessary for our survival for a while that one gender was like the disposable asset that went out to gather the food and fight the enemies and so on and so forth. But we really don't need it anymore. And it is actually dangerous for a working society, like for a tribal society where, you know, the men basically have to go out and protect the women who are vulnerable and pregnant. It's debatable. I mean, it's still it's still bad. Like, you still should have empathy for them. But instead of empathy, we have this other emotion, which is like pride. Like, we have pride about our men rather than empathy for them.
Interesting. Can you expand a bit on what you mean by pride instead of empathy?
Okay, so let me. You know how at the end of Captain America, where he's flying the plane and they're on the radio to him, and he's like, I have to crash this plane into this thing to do this thing, and I'm going to sacrifice myself. And then there's just this swell emotion and music as he charges it. Or it's like in any war film where the sound goes down really low and the music swells up really high as they make the last desperate charge towards the enemy. Or the ending of Blackadder goes forth even, where they go over the top and they all die. Or stuff like that. It's just you don't feel sorry for them. You feel this immense sense of rising pride for them. So they are doing their duty, and it's that moment where the world is basically saluting them, and off they go to die an honorable and glorious death to protect everyone else. And that is essentially the final function that men have, which is to die so that other people can survive, and so that society can survive, and so that society can attain its objectives, become better and become larger and more powerful. And that's really what it's about. I mean, that's why we build statues to these men. It's like a bribe. It's that's what Warren Farrell says, but it's more than that. It's that people don't even talk about this, but there's this pride that they have for men who sacrifice themselves. We don't feel that for women who sacrifice themselves. Instead, we feel empathy and sympathy that they had to do this. This is why you'll watch a horror film and most of the people who get killed are women, but also the person who survives is a woman. So all the men who will get killed off simply as displays of power. The women will get killed off as to push the heroes onward. This happens in action films too. So it's like that old trope of the action hero's girlfriend being dead in a freezer. He opens the fridge door and out she falls dead, or something like that. It's this thing that's meant to spur the hero on. It's it's not the feminists interpret that as the woman not mattering and not meaning anything to the man, but it's the exact opposite. It's that they took away the only thing he really cared about. and now he has nothing to lose, and he's going to go on an absolute rampage. Like, I mean, it's amazing the leaps in logic they can have, and like they get things so completely and utterly backwards all of the time. I mean, it's like rape culture. Rape culture, they have it completely backwards because it's not women who are like the victims of rape culture, it's men. Men are the ones who are like pushed, male rape victims are pushed aside because female rape victims matter more, and like they focus on them, and like men are just the perpetrators and the evil doers, and they can't be given anything because they're the evil gender. And like, look, see, like we have to judge them by their most evil people. That's why feminists really hate it when you point out there are female serial killers, and they'll go off on a rant saying there are more male serial killers and stuff like that. When the point is really that women aren't these, fonts of goodness. They're just humans. They're humans just like men are, and they do kill people, and they just have different ways of doing it, and they're better at getting away with it as well. But they are, they're still human. But in these films, you will see the man is the fallible fool, and the woman is all that is good and pure. And if the woman dies, it's a horrible tragedy. If the man dies, it's like it's just to advance the plot, or it's to show how strong the enemy is, or it's a glorious and heroic sacrifice which causes everyone to remember that person with pride. And in a sense, it's good that we have this sort of sense of pride for men who do sacrifice themselves, because it means that we, even though we don't feel sorry for them, we do feel something for them. We feel that loss and we feel that meaning. But at the same time, it also means that men's lives don't have inherent value. It's what men can do with those lives that has the value. And that is an extreme problem, really, because it causes all of this stuff, and it allows this toxic mind virus, which is feminism, to come in and say that, men can't be victims, women have to be victims because, just like garbled word salad reasons and bad statistics, and they'll, like, the whole false rape thing and the whole rape stats thing is like, what they're doing there is they're taking rape conviction rates to people who say they've been raped, and they are saying that there's this only a tiny proportion are convicted. But what are the stats actually saying? Well, of the people who say they've been raped, not everyone comes forward. So what are the police to do if they don't even get a report? Because the police have to have a report of a crime. So that rules out that could rule out like half of the cases they aren't getting through. But then they talk about there's this smaller group of people who do actually come forward and do lodge charges, and of those people, a tiny proportion are getting a conviction. But again, we don't know how many of those people are telling the truth, and evidence from family courts and men who have appealed rape convictions and won suggests that a significant chunk of that number that they say are rape victims who aren't getting any kind of justice are actually rape victims, or they might have confused themselves, because a lot of cases are they woke up in a bed not remembering the night before because they were drinking a lot, and they don't even know if they had sex. We've had cases of that where women have asked us about that, what our opinion is on like actual cases of that, and that's so muddy. Like I don't know if you could even, like you'd have struggled to even find out if they had intercourse in a lot of cases. And after that, once you've established that they have had intercourse, if they can't even remember the night, how do you even know if like they consented or not? Because they might have been drunk or have taken drugs willingly and willingly consented during that to somebody who was taking as much drugs as and alcohol as they were, and nobody actually remembers the event if it happened at all. So, like, it's such a muddy minefield, and feminists don't want to admit this. They want to admit that women often like will lie to cover something up or to get revenge on somebody and use the system against them, or for any number of other reasons. So they push for the courts to just automatically believe the woman. But if you automatically believe one gender in all circumstances regarding some sort of crime which is extremely muddy and might not have any proof to it at all, then you give that gender a weapon, and the worst examples of that gender will use that weapon, especially if you then give out payments, like large non-refundable payments, to people of that gender for reporting, which is the case with rape in the UK and a lot of the other Duluth model countries. And that is why we have had news articles about women who have accused many dozens of raping them. And then you add in that the police aren't supposed to keep track of who is lodging these complaints. So you can just lodge complaint after complaint after complaint, and you can get the money, and you can send men to jail, and you can brag about it to your friends. And only in bragging about it to your friends do you actually get caught. Because I think that's what did it for that woman in the UK who accused like a dozen men and sent a couple to prison. It's like if you don't actually brag about it afterwards, then there's no evidence. Like there's no evidence you lied. Like as long as you don't say I lied, you know they can't actually pin you down for that. And the police have been told not to actually keep track of false rape convictions. I mean, not false rape convictions, like women who admit lying, because it apparently hurts victims who think they might not be believed. And the problem is that just emboldens liars, really. Like, this whole system is being set up for liars. And they have to realize that's a form of rape culture where the system is being set up to put men away who are innocent on the word of a liar, and that's going to harm victims down the line greatly. Like as soon as like that whole system breaks, suddenly you've got thousands and thousands and thousands of men who are forming a class action lawsuit, and they're going to win. I mean, as long as the judge and jury are fair, they're going to win. If they actually consider the facts and they consider them the way they did in the Depp trial, they'll win. And if they do win, then what's that going to do for victims? Nothing good, is it? It's not going to do anything good for victims. If you've set up this entire system so that liars can profit.
I think the reality is, though, is that people who label themselves as feminists who are pushing these kind of things is really just a power move, and they don't really know how to do proper changes, I would say. They may have made some good, but not a lot. Example I can think of is just the argument of, I'd bring up the Me Too movement. I guess I should bring that up, where it's a social movement that's supposed to be about rape victims feeling more comfortable coming out, and yet it's excluded men on multiple occasions. And when you've asked their leaders, when you're at guys, they're like, oh, we'll get around to it, and they never do. And so it excludes the possibility of men as victims. And also, you can't really get them to speak much of false accusations. They'll say claiming that it's a false accusation hurts the victim themselves, and that I couldn't believe the statement they said. They said if someone thinks the victim is falsely accusing, it's anti-woman. And that was a really sad statement to hear, to say the least, because there are a million reasons you could think someone's falsely accusing another person, whether it be flimsy evidence, whether it be they be a family member. There are so many other reasons, and they were like, no, it's anti-woman. They're being misogynist.
Well, see,
So-
I find that whole line of thinking misandrous, because it's essentially saying that one gender is inherently more honest by default, because those same people would have no problem accepting that sometimes there are people who happen to be male who lie. So then why couldn't there also sometimes be people who happen to be female who lie?
Exactly. It's the fact that they believe women can't lie whatsoever, and that's victim blaming. And then they also they're so focused on social reform, which is needed, but the legal reform part is just not seen as much. If you want rape cases to be taken care of better, there needs to be an entire legal reform of just the systems currently in place for dealing with these, and not quotas, and not the changing of training. Well, maybe a little bit, but not this victim-centered training where they basically make it that the first person you question, if it's a male-female situation, is the male, and ask him, did you hurt this person? Even if it seems like it's obvious that he was the victim. So they aren't really, they refuse to speak on making actual legal reforms to take care of these cases properly. They're putting in quotas instead. And frankly, it's just, honestly, the rape culture is just being perpetuated even more by them. I mean, there are probably more cases that are coming in each year, and so few actual rape victims are getting their cases heard, versus probably many who are falsely accusing or consented and then took the consent back, or other situations. Or, as you brought up, Maud, situations of drinking. Another situation is underage people who lie about their age. There's a lot of situations out there that can occur. I don't remember her name, but I could have sworn that a while ago I was speaking with someone. They brought up that they knew someone who was a rape victim who got absolutely assaulted by people who call themselves feminists because she didn't want to speak up. She didn't want to be part of Me Too. She didn't understand why they didn't accept men. I mean, they're possibly attacking their own victims that they say they're protecting.
Well, they are hypocrites because it really is about power. It is just, I mean, it is all about power, really, when you think about it, because they don't. Like, if they actually wanted to help victims, they would help male victims too. But they just don't. and it's sad that they don't. They've done so much damage to victims generally, and people think they're the good guys. It's fantastically, horrifically perverse.
For those of you who have just joined, it is an open floor, so do feel free to speak.
Yeah, no, I was behind. I was watching the YouTube, and I was like, "Hang on, I'm typing. That's really old." So I thought popping in.
Yeah, and I kind of really don't know where we're at in the conversation right now, if I'm being honest. But I definitely agree with what Dark was saying, that I mean the system needs to change, because even if people's beliefs change, I don't think it's going to make that much of a difference, because I think most people know inherently, most of the people I talk to agree that a lot of the law system is just completely ridiculous. But the problem is the courts don't agree, and that's at the end of the day the problem. The problem is the decisions in the courts. I mean, I posted an article earlier, a couple articles of situations where sexual assault victims were charged for back child support for when they were molested when they were children. And it's like, how is that justice? Is that not the purpose of the justice system? Right? To interpret the law in a way that delivers justice to everyone involved. But it's not even about that anymore. Most of the time it's just about who can outlast who, financially speaking. Right? It's ridiculous.
Another issue too, though. I mean, Blue, you'd have to inform me on this, but in the U.S. at least, our judges are all elected. I think that is a major issue, because then that means our judicial system becomes full of this agenda because they're focused on re-election to their position. And so then they're not actually judging with lack of bias.
That's
Not
very
lack of
true
bias,
too.
but with open eyes, per se. An open mind, as they should be.
No,
It is
yeah, I
horribly
mean,
messed.
true. No, I was just gonna say, Trudeau in Canada, like the Prime Minister of Canada or whatever, I forgot what the actual title is, but they made a new law. Like, I don't think they banned guns completely, but they made a ridiculous gun control law, and pretty much everyone who was informed on the topic agreed. Like, it was simply because he wanted to be reelected. It's a publicity stunt because they want to seem like they're doing good things. You can't really see the air quotes, but they're doing good things, right? So I definitely think that's true too. They do a lot of things for reelection, but I think the inherent system itself is even flawed. I was reading an experience of a man who his wife divorced him and he ended up with the kids, but he didn't actually. I think he either didn't file for full custody or he filed a bit later on. But regardless, he has custody of the kids, and she was able to file for child support and get $2,400 a month from him when she's not even seeing the kids. And he can't fight it because he doesn't have any money to fight it, because he has $2,400 to pay a month and he has $18,000 in back child support. So he can't even afford to go to court to solve the problem that he needs to go to court for. It's like, it's a ridiculous loop and you just end up stuck. Right? So he's living in a mobile home with 3 kids, right? And he can't even get out of this like endless pit. And that's not even a judge problem. It never even gets to the judge before it becomes unfair. Right? So,
Yeah, I was just going to say that the only person or organization that benefits is the state.
Yeah, a big reason why so many huge child support payments go through is because the government gets a cut of it.
And their reform programs don't exist whatsoever. I have a friend, and he got a juvie record, and it should have been expunged. Never was expunged. And then on top of that, so this is a funny thing. They tell you your file when you end up in juvie will be closed because of the fact you were a minor. And so your workplaces can't see that record. Unless it's like really like need to know content, like a rape case. But like otherwise they shouldn't be able to have access to it because it's supposed to be locked. What they don't tell you is you have to pay for it to be locked. So they tell you it's going to be locked and it never actually is because you didn't pay them for it and you don't find out till years later. I mean, everything about the judicial system is finding the best way to make profit, honestly.
Going back to judges in the States, you said they're elected. How are they elected?
So what happens is, I don't have internet because my power went out on my phone. But if someone could search up the term for judges, I think the way it goes is every presidential election, so every 4 years, they grab a group of judges and they put them on the ballot. And you elect whether they should stay in their seat or not. They obviously don't do them all at once, but they do them in different groups. And so then you elect that judge. If the judge gets enough votes, they stay as a judge. If they don't, they're taken out of their seat.
Yeah, it's different in the UK. It's more of a secret set of people, really. I don't think they're elected per se. I think they just govern, and I think there's 3 specific branches of judiciary, and they've got to be one of them. I was thinking about this the other day. It's the same as politics, right? If you've got a system which is a popularist system, yeah. So if I say, okay, I'm going to cut out all benefits, if I do some unpopular legislation, I'm going to get kicked out. So it's never going to work. So if the judges are elected in that way over there, when are we ever going to have the unpopular laws? The unpopular. Do you get what I'm saying? It'll never be a perfect system, and it'll never be a fair system either, because it's a popularity contest. It's not about law. It's even more so the hard laws, like, I know what, let's let parents sort out their own child support since they both work. There's nothing wrong with that suggestion. I think it's a great idea. But it's never going to be popularized because it's never going to get people into judges' seats or, politicians into office and stuff. So it's just broken.
I mean, yeah, I agree. The problem, and I've said this so many times before, the problem with democracy is that there being more of you than me doesn't make you right. Validity does not come with the most people who hold the argument. It comes with the actual evidence behind the argument, right? And instead of,
Good call.
Focusing on people, like, that's one of the reasons why I think, as many flaws as it had as well, China's system with exams for leaders was actually not the worst idea, because you're actually testing their fitness. You're at least trying to test their fitness, as opposed to just who does everybody like. And
yeah, exactly.
Like, for instance, in the U.S., we have, Dark was right. We actually have, it depends. For county judges, it is 4 years. She was correct about that. For federal judges and for Supreme Court judges, they do actually serve life. So unless they are impeached, removed from office, blah, 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 or they resign, they essentially serve for life in federal courts. But below that, in county courts, they serve around 4 years. But like you said, you never have anyone in office, essentially, either in office or in courts, who has an unpopular opinion, because they're elected by the popular vote. And no offense to, like, the majority, but the majority is dumb a lot of times, right? They don't make educated decisions, right? They make decisions based on what they feel personally is correct. And at the end of the day, that's not a good system, because that decision doesn't affect them personally. It affects everyone, right? So at that point, I think we should be looking at logically what is the best conclusion that one can come to. And a lot of these laws just make absolutely zero sense. So,
I mean, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that where we are right now is not progress. It absolutely is. You know, I mean, I don't like the word democracy because I don't think we live in one, but it's about as good as it's ever been before. But I do think we've hit a wall with the popularist view, because there's got to be another way of doing it. There's got to be another way. I mean, just for example,
We are
using
kind of getting off of topic here, to be honest.
Oh right, sorry, I don't
We
know.
are going
I
into
didn't know it was a
getting into
topic.
politics and things like that, which is very far away from what we're talking about. I mean, granted, you're raising valid points. We can't change laws unless that we can make our position popular. But I mean, there's another way of looking at it. We can make the other position seem very unpopular, which, if you've got empathy for men, shouldn't be that difficult. But I mean, I will push back slightly on the exams in China thing, because that's really just an ideological purity test. So yeah, I mean, in theory, an exam to become a leader is fine, but then they're like, do you swear unswerving allegiance to the like, the king? Because I really don't want to call him a president, because he basically is just a king, like just a non matrilineal king. I don't know if it's matrilineal, but anyway, he's just a king, and you swear undying loyalty to him. You swear that your ideological purity is perfect, and so on and so forth. This is kind of how feminism works, really. To bring us back onto topic, you are examined all the time to see if you are ideologically pure, and any one mark against your name means you're not ideologically pure, and you should get struck from the movement. Which is
that's
why
not.
we have so many.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, that's also timeless as well. So like, I was watching some stand up the other day, and it was like, oh yeah, so Kevin Hart said this years ago, and I was like, and he's like, oh, he's been asked to apologize again, and he goes, I'm not apologizing again. I did it 10 years ago. So it seems to me like it's just, I don't know what you would call that. It's almost like they're cancelling people because they can, not because it's a good idea or it's recent or current or whatever, or it's, it's not even righteous, I don't think, anymore.
Well, and
they
the reason
feel
why I
righteous,
said that.
and that's what matters. It's a purity spiral, is what I'd call it. It's a group of people who want to feel righteous, so they form a mob and go after people. It's very easy to fall into, like, retweeting this person who said something that offends you personally, so that other people can pile on and retweet it and pile on and retweet it and pile on and retweet it, knowing that what you're doing is punishing them for saying this bad thing that you don't like. And it's very, very easy to do, but it's the kind of thing that the general public don't get trained not to do. We really need training on how to not fall into groupthink, but politicians won't put that in schools because they like groupthink.
Well, and I just want to clarify, when I said that I like the fitness tests, I mean I like the concept of testing fitness as opposed to just popular vote or you were so-and-so's dad, so you get it automatically. The idea of testing fitness is something that we do in science, and it works fantastic. And then you have peer review, which is another thing. So it's like if you had a similar system to ensure that a ruler was good, I'm not saying China had it, I'm saying they had the concept. And yeah, it was really flawed. And I said that. That was the first thing I said. It was a flawed system. But I think the concept was good. But I think the main problem isn't even necessarily the governmental systems or any of that. I think the main problem is just that there's so much money involved with, not talking about the politics. I'm talking about, back on topic, the court, as far as men's rights and things like that. The reason why we have so many problems is because there's so much money involved. And so people aren't motivated to do the right thing. People are motivated to line their pockets. They don't really care about justice, right? Lawyers aren't there to defend the truth. Lawyers are there to make money and to defend their clients so they get paid, right? It's all about the money at the end of the day. And I think that's the problem, because if this were about justice, men's rights would be all over the place, just like women's rights, because that's equality. But it's not, right? Because that's not profitable.
Mhm.
It's much easier for Uncle Sam to get a cut if he's, exploiting men.
Yeah,
I think it
we-
is. Sorry, I was just going to
Yeah.
say as
Go
a
on.
final comment. Do you genuinely think that that's what society? Well, let me rephrase it properly. Western civilization is currently doing, or has ultimately resulted in.
Well, I do think that we've created a system that is now increasingly morally bankrupt and has increasingly decided that the truth doesn't matter and is
Mm.
like falling off. But this is again back into politics, so I think this is a good time to end it. If Dark, you want to take us out?
Sure. And my final commentary would be, I'm not really sure what the solution to the situation of the fact that the judiciary is so profitable, though I would think that if we found some way for there to be, I don't know, a tax cut of some sort, or maybe a bonus or something, or some kind of government fund which helped promote proper justice when it came to lawyers, like a tax cut to firms for cases they do, or something around those lines. That might change something, but that'd be a bit of a radical change. But anyways, this has been our now Saturday live stream chat in the Men Are Human Rights server. We are here every Saturday at 3 p.m. UK, 9 p.m. Central, 10 p.m. Eastern, or p.m. a.m. 9 a.m. Central, 10 a.m. Eastern. We're always happy to have you guys here. If you ever have topic recommendations, you can always message Men Are Human, Blue, myself, and we will see you all next week.